So there are probably a number of barriers to innovation in an organization. Probably the first one is that's not how we've done it in the past. And there is a lot of that question or that comment being made, especially now that we're involving commercial entities as commercial providers for human spaceflight. If it's not how we've done it in the past, just about nobody's comfortable with that position. We have to get comfortable with the fact that there's a difference between wrong and different. There are some wrong ways to do things, and maybe we've got enough scars and lessons learned to say, boy, we're never going to do that again. And there's also different. So taking an approach to entry, descent, and landing and use 2 or 4 or 3 parachutes. We don't have a lot of experience with 2 or 4. We have a lot of experience with 3. That doesn't make 4 wrong. It makes it different. And it's something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. And I'm happy to say that especially the commercial crew team is asking those questions and is looking at it from the point of view there's a difference between different and wrong. Another barrier is an assumption or making an assumption that somebody's already addressed that issue. Oh, by the way, did somebody make sure X happened? Oh, by the way, did somebody make sure to ask the question so-and-so? Okay, if it's a verbal response, you know, I think it was Reagan who said trust but verify. If it's a verbal response, verify. And make sure that don't assume that it's been taken care of until you see that it's been taken care of. Don't assume the question's been asked until you see that the question has been asked and answered. So assumption is another big barrier. Another assumption is, or another barrier, I would say, is the not invented here. It could be a great idea somewhere else, but because I didn't come up with it, or my organization, or my process, or my system didn't design it, and didn't develop it, and didn't come up with it, it can't work here. I give a great example of that, I think, is for the longest time, the Kennedy Space Center used IBM punch cards for timekeeping. And we got into a habit of behavior, an institutional behavior, that we always used IBM punch cards to do timekeeping. Now, those punch cards evolved to the point where we simply wrote our time on the card. But because the business process was such that it categorized the cards, we still did that probably years after, I want to say multiple years after, there were automated systems out there to do it electronically. We didn't invent those automated systems, so they weren't sure that they would work here because we didn't invent them here. And then I would say one more that's a really big one is we're, like was mentioned earlier in the presentations today at the conference, we're in a multi-generational situation in our workforce, multicultural, multi-generational, and there are different ideas coming in that people want to bring up these new and different ideas, but the incentive system, the motivation for bringing up those ideas is not there. We as managers, as well as fellow employees, but for sure we as managers and leaders of the organization have to solicit and really work hard to make sure that these new and different ways of doing things aren't necessarily wrong. And we ought to reward for trying. We ought to reward for offering up these things. And I don't mean it doesn't have to be monetary. It just needs to be acknowledgement. We got a really new and different idea out here for doing thus and such. Let's pursue that a little bit. Let's give it some airtime. Let's give it some space and see if it grows into something beneficial.